He said it as a joke. Why don't you just marry me and make my life easier? And the woman standing across from him, his best friend for 7 years, didn't laugh. She froze, holding a screwdriver in one hand and a half-eaten slice of cold pizza in the other, and then her eyes filled with tears that had been waiting far too long to fall. Adrian Hayes, 32, a single father who had built his entire existence around keeping things simple, suddenly realized the most complicated truth of his life had been standing 3 feet away from him the whole time. Stay with me until the very end of this story, hit that like button, and drop the name of the city you're watching from in the comments so I can see how far this story has traveled. The shelf wasn't going to install itself, and Adrian Hayes had promised he'd be there by 7. He pulled into the driveway at 7:04, which for him counted as late, and sat in the truck for a second with the engine ticking and the October air going cold against the windshield. Nora's porch light was on. It was always on when she was expecting him. He'd told her 100 times she didn't have to do that, and she'd told him 100 times she knew she didn't have to, which wasn't the same thing as saying she would stop. He grabbed the toolbox from the passenger seat and climbed out. The house was a narrow 2-bedroom rental on Linden Street, with a crooked front step and a kitchen Nora had been slowly destroying and rebuilding for the better part of 8 months. She called it a renovation. Adrian called it a hostage situation. Every time he came over, there was a new hole in a wall, or a cabinet door leaning against the fridge like it was taking a smoke break, or a pile of screws on the counter that would end up, inevitably, in a coffee mug by the end of the night. He didn't knock. He hadn't knocked in years. "It's me," he called, shouldering the door open. "In here," Nora called back, which was unnecessary because she was always in there. The kitchen was the only room in the house she actually lived in. The living room had a couch and a lamp and an unopened box of books she'd been meaning to unpack since she moved in. The bedroom had a mattress on the floor and a reading light clipped to a windowsill. Nora Blake didn't believe in furniture the way other people believed in it. She believed in projects. She believed in the idea that a house was something you built, not something you bought. He set the toolbox down on the counter and looked at her. She was standing on a step stool with a pencil between her teeth, her dark hair pulled up in the kind of messy knot that looked like it was one shrug away from falling down completely. She was wearing an oversized flannel shirt that he was almost certain used to belong to him, although he'd never said anything about it and neither had she. Her jeans had paint on them. Her socks didn't match. She was the most alive thing in any room she stood in, and he had stopped noticing that a long time ago, the way you stop noticing the sound of your own heartbeat. "You're late," she said around the pencil. "I'm 4 minutes late." 4 minutes is late when the person waiting is hungry. "There's pizza on the counter." "That's my pizza. You brought this pizza for me. It's a gift. Gifts are not defensive weapons." He laughed and shrugged out of his jacket, draping it over the back of a chair. "Where do you want the shelf?" "Above the sink. I measured. The brackets are in the bag." "You measured." "I measured." "Nora, the last time you measured, you put a towel hook 3 inches above my head, and I almost took an eye out." She pulled the pencil out of her mouth and pointed it at him. "That was one time. That was last Tuesday. That was, okay, last Tuesday, but in my defense, I was tired." "You're always tired. I have a demanding job. You teach 2nd grade. You try teaching 2nd grade, Hayes, and then come tell me it's not demanding." He was already crouching to open the toolbox, smiling without meaning to. This was how it went with them. It had always gone like this. The back and forth, the easy insults, the way she called him Hayes when she was making fun of him and Adrian when she wasn't. He had friends he'd known longer than Nora. He had a brother. He had a mother who called every Sunday. None of them could make him smile the way she did, and he had stopped asking himself why a long time ago because the answer had never really seemed important. "Where's Ellie tonight?" Nora asked. "My mom's. She wanted to bake something. Cookies, I think. Or a cake." I stopped listening after the 3rd time she said the word frosting. She's 4. She is an extremely opinionated 4. She gets that from her father. She gets that from her grandmother, thank you very much. Nora laughed, and the sound of it was so familiar it was like a song he had known since childhood. He pulled the brackets out of the bag and set them on the counter, then looked up at her, still standing on the step stool, still holding that pencil. "Come down from there before you break something," he said. "I'll do the measuring." "I already measured." "I know you did, and I'm going to do it again, Because I enjoy my life and I would like to keep living it. She rolled her eyes but stepped down. He caught her by the elbow without thinking about it, steadying her, and she stepped past him with her shoulder brushing his chest, and neither of them said anything about that because there was nothing to say about it. They had been bumping into each other in small kitchens for 7 years. It didn't mean anything. It had never meant anything. That was what he told himself anyway. He got the tape measure out and started marking the wall. Nora hopped up onto the counter and sat there with her legs crossed, eating the cold pizza and watching him work. The kitchen smelled like sawdust and basil, and the cheap candle she always burned when the weather turned, the one that was supposed to smell like a cabin in the woods, but actually smelled like a department store's idea of a cabin in the woods. "How was school?" he asked. A kid threw up on the reading rug. Jesus. It wasn't even one of the criers. It was Marcus. Marcus is my toughest kid. He eats paste and thinks it's funny. And he threw up on the reading rug and then cried for 45 minutes. Is the rug okay? The rug is dead. The rug has gone to be with the other rugs. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. It was a good rug. Had a lot of heart. He bit down on a smile and made another mark on the wall. How's Marcus? Marcus is fine. Marcus went home and probably ate more paste. Marcus will outlive us all. How are you? She paused, just for a second. He didn't look at her. He was busy with the level, but he heard the pause, the small hitch in the rhythm of their conversation, and he registered it the way you register a door opening in another room when you're not sure if anyone else is home. I'm fine, she said. Don't mem me. I didn't mem you. You absolutely memmed me. That was a full mem. That was a M with subtext. I'm installing a shelf, Nora. I don't have time for subtext. Liar. He laughed, but he was watching her out of the corner of his eye now. She was still sitting on the counter, but she wasn't eating the pizza anymore. She was holding it, looking at it, not at him. Tell me about your day, she said. You don't want to hear about my day. I always want to hear about your day. Okay. Jim in accounting sent another passive-aggressive email about the coffee filters. The coffee filters again. The coffee filters again. He claims somebody is hoarding them. He has essentially accused every person in the office of a war crime against Folgers. There are 14 of us. We drink maybe 2 pots a day. The math doesn't math, Nora. The man is unwell. He's going to snap one day. He already snapped. He's in the second phase now. The revenge phase. Is he coming for you? I don't drink the office coffee, so I think I'm safe. I think he suspects Brenda. Not Brenda. Brenda. Brenda bakes for the whole office every Friday. That's what makes it so dangerous. She laughed, and this time the laugh sounded a little bit like it was covering something. He didn't know what. He marked the wall, and then he marked it again, because he had lost track of where he was. Pass me the drill, he said. She slid off the counter and walked it over to him. Their hands brushed when she handed it off, and she didn't pull back fast, but she didn't linger either. He took the drill and set the first bracket in place. How's Ellie doing? She asked. With the whole school thing. She likes it. She likes her teacher. She doesn't like the other kid named Ellie in her class, because apparently in a preschool of 20 children, 2 Ellies is one too many. There's another Ellie? There's another Ellie. She's very aggrieved about this. She came home last week and asked me if we could change her name. To what? She hadn't worked that part out yet. She was still in the complaint phase. I think she was leaning toward Rainbow. Rainbow Hayes. Rainbow Hayes. That's a strong name. That's a CEO name. That's a woman who is going to rob a bank, Nora. I'm not raising a criminal. Nora was laughing, and then she wasn't. She had wandered over to the fridge, and she was standing with her back to him, opening and closing the door, pretending to look for something. He'd seen her do this before. It was what she did when she didn't want him to see her face. He set the drill down. Hey, he said. You okay? I'm fine. You're doing the fridge thing. What's the fridge thing? The thing where you open the fridge and stand there like you're looking for the meaning of life. Maybe I am. In a fridge? People have looked in weirder places, Hayes. She closed the fridge. She turned around. She had the same face she always had, which was to say she had arranged her face into the same face she always had. and the arrangement was not as convincing as she probably thought it was. He'd known her too long. He could see the pins. "What's going on?" he said. "Nothing's going on. Drill the shelf. I'm going to die of shelflessness." Nora. "Adrian, I'm fine. It's been a long week." Marcus threw up. "The rug is dead. The world is hard. I want a shelf. Please drill the shelf." He drilled the shelf. He did it because she was asking him to, and because he didn't know what else to do when she got like this, and because the truth was, he was a little bit afraid of the version of her that had just been standing in front of the fridge. There was something underneath it he didn't want to look at. Not because he didn't care. He cared more than he knew what to do with, but because looking at it would require him to ask a question, and the question would require an answer, and he had a feeling that the answer was the kind of thing that couldn't be unheard. So he drilled the shelf, and she handed him screws, and they fell back into the rhythm of it, the banter and the back and forth, and by the time the first bracket was in the wall, they were teasing each other again about the coffee filters and about Rainbow Hayes, the future bank robber. The shelf took longer than it should have because the wall was older than either of them, and it fought every screw. By the time it was up and level, and Nora had loaded 2 candles and a potted herb and a framed photo of her dead grandmother's cat onto it, it was almost 9. "The cat," Adrian said, looking at the photo. "We're really going with the cat." His name was Bartholomew. "We're really going with Bartholomew the cat. He was a good cat. He had 1 ear. He had 1.5. Don't erase him." "I'm not erasing him. I'm honoring him with accuracy." She threw a screw at him. He caught it out of the air, which surprised both of them, and he held it up between 2 fingers like a prize. "Reflexes, Blake. Luck. Skill. Lucky skill." They stood there in the middle of her half-finished kitchen for a second, grinning at each other, and he was aware, very suddenly, that he didn't want to go home. Ellie wasn't coming back until tomorrow morning. The house would be empty. The house was always a little bit too empty when Ellie wasn't in it, and he had gotten used to finding reasons to be somewhere else on those nights. And most of those reasons, if he was being honest, were sitting on a counter in a flannel shirt that used to be his. "You want a beer?" Nora asked. "Yeah." She pulled 2 out of the fridge and handed him one and hopped back up on the counter, and he leaned against the opposite counter, and they drank in silence for a minute. Outside, someone's dog was barking. Inside, the new shelf was crooked by about a 1/4 inch, and neither of them was going to mention it. "Thank you," she said, "for coming over." "You don't have to thank me." "I know, I do anyway." "You don't." "I do, Adrian." He looked at her. She was using his first name. She was looking at her beer bottle. He felt something shift in the room. He couldn't have said what it was. Something in the air pressure. Something in the way she was holding her shoulders. He was tired, he realized. Not physically. Just tired in that bone-deep way he got sometimes when he'd been alone too long in a life that used to have another person in it, and he was standing in her kitchen with his boots off and his sleeves rolled up and a beer in his hand, and it was warm in here, and the shelf was up, and Ellie was at his mother's, and the house on Linden Street, with its crooked step and its broken cabinets, felt more like a home than his actual home had felt in 3 years. He didn't mean to say it. That was the thing. He wasn't planning to say it. It just came out, the way jokes did with her, the way half the things he said to her came out, because she was the one person he never had to draft a sentence in his head before he said it. "You know what?" he said. "You should just marry me, Blake. Make both our lives easier." He smiled when he said it. He took another sip of his beer. It was a throwaway line. It was a Tuesday night kitchen joke. He had said things like it before. He had said things like it for years. She had a whole arsenal of replies, and he was already braced for whichever one she was going to pick. The one about how she wouldn't marry him for $1 million, or the one about how he couldn't handle being married to her for a week, or the one about how she'd think about it after he figured out how to load a dishwasher like a grown man. She didn't say any of them. She didn't say anything. He lowered the beer. Nora was still sitting on the counter with her legs crossed, and she was looking down at the bottle in her hands, and her shoulders had gone very still in a way he had never seen them go still before. The kitchen was suddenly too quiet. Even the dog outside had stopped barking. "Nora," he said. "Don't." "Don't what?" "Don't say it like that." "Like what?" "It was a joke. It's always a joke." "I know," she said. "That's the problem." He set the beer down. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at the floor now, at a spot next to his boots, and he watched a tear slide off the end of her nose and land on her knee, and it hit him that she was crying. She was crying without making any sound, which was somehow worse than if she'd been making sound, because it meant she had gotten good at it. "Hey," he said, and his voice had gone soft without his permission. "Hey, what? Adrian, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Nora, I know what I'm doing." "Okay. I know what I'm doing, and I need you to just—" She stopped. She was breathing the way people breathed when they were trying not to break open. He knew that breathing. He had done that breathing. He had done it in hospital parking lots and at kitchen tables, and once, memorably, in the middle of a Target, and he recognized it in her now, and it made his chest feel like someone had stepped on it. "Hey," he said. "Hey, Blake, come here." "No." "Come here." "If I come over there, I'm going to lose it." "Okay, I'm going to lose it, and I don't want to do this like this." "Do what?" She laughed, but it was wet and broken, and it came out of her mouth like she was trying to get rid of it. She finally looked up at him. Her eyes were very bright and very full and very, very tired, and he realized with a sudden, terrible clarity that she had looked like this before, many times. He just hadn't been paying attention. "Adrian," she said, "how long have we known each other?" 7 years. 7 years. 7 in March. Right, in March, because we met at Carla's birthday thing, where you spilled a drink on me and then apologized for 45 minutes. "I remember." "And then you called the next day." "I called to make sure your shirt was okay." "You called to make sure my shirt was okay." "Adrian, who does that? Who calls a woman the day after a party to make sure her shirt is okay?" "And then you asked me to coffee, to apologize again, in person, for the shirt. It was a nice shirt. It was a $15 shirt from Target. It looked nice on you." She closed her eyes. A tear slid down her cheek. She didn't bother to wipe it away. "Adrian," she said, "I need you to listen to me. I need you to listen to me and not make a joke, and not try to fix it, and not try to steer us away from it the way you always do. Can you do that?" "Yeah." "Are you sure?" Yeah. She took a breath. She held it. She let it out. "I have been in love with you," she said, "for a really long time." The kitchen went absolutely silent. He heard the hum of the refrigerator. He heard the hum of his own blood. "I've been in love with you since before Marissa left," she said. "I've been in love with you since before Ellie was born. I've been in love with you since the coffee, Adrian. I've been in love with you since the stupid coffee that you took me to because of my stupid shirt, and I have been standing in this kitchen and in 100 other kitchens and at your kitchen table and at your sister's wedding and in the waiting room when Ellie had the thing with her ear, and I have been loving you the entire time. And I have been really, really quiet about it because you weren't ready. And then you had a baby, and then Marissa left, and then you were a person with a broken heart and a small child, and I wasn't going to be the woman who came in and started putting her hands on your life when you were trying to survive it." "Nora, I'm not done, okay? I told myself I could do it. I told myself I could just be your friend. Be the friend. Be the person who's there. Be the person who picks Ellie up from daycare when you're stuck at work and who knows you take your coffee with 2 sugars when you're tired but with 1 sugar when you're not. And who remembers your mother's birthday because you forget your mother's birthday. I told myself I could do that and it would be enough. And most of the time, Adrian, most of the time, it is enough. I love your kid. I love your mom. I love knowing where your spare key is. I love all of it, and I don't want to blow it up. I don't want to be the person who blows it up." She paused. Her hands were shaking. She put the beer bottle down on the counter very carefully, like it was a small animal. "But then you say things," she said, "like the thing you just said. And I can't keep doing it, Adrian. I can't keep doing the thing where you say marry me like it's a joke and I laugh like it's a joke. Because it is not a joke. Not to me. It hasn't been a joke in a long time." She looked at him. Her face was wet and her chin was trembling, and she looked, more than anything, exhausted. She looked like someone who had been holding a door closed for a long, long time and had finally decided to sit down. "I'm telling you now," she said, "because I don't want to spend another 7 years being quiet about it. You deserve to know. And I deserve to not lie about it anymore. Even if nothing changes. Even if you walk out of here and you don't know what to do with this, and neither of us ever talks about it again. I would rather say it and be embarrassed than keep swallowing it until it makes me sick. So, that's what's going on. That's why I was doing the fridge thing. She tried to smile. It didn't quite work. Adrian didn't move. He couldn't move. He was aware of his own body in a way he hadn't been aware of it in years. The weight of his feet on her kitchen floor. The beer bottle warming in his hand. The scratch of his jaw where he'd forgotten to shave that morning. He was aware of the shelf they had just put up. He was aware of the candle burning on the counter. He was aware of a small voice in the back of his head that had been trying to get his attention for years. And it was saying very quietly, "You knew." He had known, not in a way he could have said out loud. Not in a way he had ever let himself look at. But he had known the way you know. There's a second step when you're walking down the stairs in the dark. He had known in the way she showed up with soup when Ellie had the flu, and in the way she always knew when he was lying about being fine, and in the way she had a drawer in his kitchen for her hair ties and a toothbrush in his bathroom that had been there for 2 years and that neither of them had ever once acknowledged. He had known in the way he'd stopped going on second dates with other women, and in the way he'd started comparing every one of those women, unfairly, to a person he hadn't even admitted he was comparing them to. He had known in the way he had felt for 3.5 years now, a low hum of contentment every time she walked into a room, a feeling he had labeled friendship because he didn't have a safer word for it. He had known, and he had looked the other way, because looking directly at it would have required him to do something about it, and he didn't know how to do anything about it without breaking the one thing in his life that worked. "Nora," he said. His voice didn't sound like his voice. "You don't have to say anything." I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything, Adrian, really. I mean it. That's not why I told you. I didn't tell you so you would say something back. I told you so I could stop carrying it by myself." Okay. They stood there. The candle flickered. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere down the street, the dog started barking again. "I should go," he said. He did not want to go. He wanted to stay. He wanted to walk across the kitchen and put his hand on her face and say something that would fix it. But he didn't know what would fix it, and he was afraid of the things that might come out of his mouth if he started talking, because he didn't trust them yet. He didn't know which ones were real and which ones were reflex. "Yeah," Nora said. "Yeah, probably. I'm not running out. I know. I just need to—" "I know, Adrian, go. It's fine. It's not fine. It's fine enough. Go." He picked up his jacket. He stood there holding it for a second. She was looking at the floor again. Her hands were braced on the edge of the counter, and her shoulders were up around her ears, and she looked smaller than he had ever seen her look. And he had seen her at her grandmother's funeral, and he had seen her the night she got fired from her first teaching job, and he had never seen her look this small. He crossed the kitchen without meaning to. He didn't touch her. He wanted to. He didn't. He just stood in front of her, close enough that she would have had to look up to see his face, and he waited until she did. "Hey," he said. "Hey, I'm going to figure this out." "You don't have to." "Nora." "Adrian, you don't—" "I know I don't have to. I'm telling you I'm going to, okay? I need a minute. I need tonight. Can you give me tonight?" She nodded. Her chin was still trembling. She bit down on her lower lip and nodded again, harder, like she was trying to convince her own body of something. "Okay," he said. "Okay. I'm going to call you tomorrow." "You don't have to call." "I'm going to call." He left before he could do anything stupid, like stay. The drive home was 8 minutes, and he did not remember any of it. He pulled into his driveway and sat in the truck with the engine off and his hands on the wheel and the silence of his own empty house in front of him, and he did what he had been refusing to do for 7 years. He let himself look at it. He thought about the first time she'd held Ellie in the hospital, the day after Marissa had walked out. He had been 30 pounds lighter than he was now, and he had not slept in 4 days, and he had been holding a newborn and an entire marriage's worth of failure. And Nora had shown up with a casserole and a car seat and a determination that he had mistaken, at the time, for friendship. She had sat on the edge of his bed, and she had said, "Give me the baby, Adrian. You look like a hostage." and he had given her the baby, and Ellie had stopped crying for the first time in 2 days, and he had cried instead, and Nora had let him, and she had not once in the 4 years since referred to that night, not once teased him for it, not once used it against him. She had just tucked it away somewhere and kept moving. He thought about the Christmas Ellie was 2, and he'd been broke and exhausted and underslept, and he'd come downstairs on Christmas morning to find Nora in his kitchen in pajamas, making pancakes, because she had driven over at 6 a.m. so Ellie would have someone to open presents with who wasn't just her sad, divorced father. He had never asked her to do that. She had just done it. And when he had tried to thank her, she had waved him off and said, "Don't make it weird, Hayes. I like pancakes." He thought about the dates. God, the dates. The 3 years of dates he had gone on and come home from, and the way he had, every single time, texted Nora afterward to tell her how they'd gone, and the way she had always texted back, always, no matter what time it was, and the way she had always had something funny to say, and the way, if he was honest with himself, he had always felt a little bit of relief when the dates hadn't worked out, because it meant he could go back to texting Nora without feeling like he had to start rationing it. He thought about Ellie. Ellie, who called her Miss Nora because Adrian had explained carefully the first time that Miss Nora was a grown-up and grown-ups had titles, and Ellie, being Ellie, had decided the title was part of her name, like a queen. Miss Nora, who had taught Ellie to tie her shoes because Adrian had been losing his mind trying to teach her, and Nora had been watching them both from the couch and had finally said, "Oh, for God's sake, come here, kid, let me show you." Miss Nora, who knew Ellie's favorite flavor of yogurt. Miss Nora, who was in most of the photos on Adrian's phone. Miss Nora, who Ellie had once announced at the dinner table, very seriously, was my favorite person who is not my dad or grandma. He thought about himself. He thought about the man who had sat in this truck 20 minutes ago and joked about marriage like it was a punchline. He thought about how many times he had done that, how many times he had let himself say something he half meant and then pretend he had meant all of it as a joke, because the joke was a safety net, and the safety net was how he had kept her close without ever having to admit what he was keeping close. He thought about how cruel that was. He hadn't meant to be cruel. He had meant, he thought, to keep everything exactly where it was. He had meant to protect the friendship. He had meant to protect Ellie, who did not need another woman walking in and out of her life. He had meant to protect himself, because he had already been left once, and he was not, under any circumstances, going to survive being left twice. But he hadn't been protecting Nora. He had been using her. He had been taking the comfort of her without ever saying out loud what that comfort was. He had been asking her to be his wife in every way that didn't have a word attached, and then, every once in a while, making a joke about it, so that he could feel the shape of the thing he wasn't saying without ever having to actually say it. And she had stood in her kitchen tonight and told him she couldn't do it anymore. He put his forehead on the steering wheel. "I'm going to figure this out," he had said, like it was a math problem. Like there was going to be an answer on the other side of it, a clean one, with a number attached. He sat in the truck for a long time. When he finally went inside, the house was dark and it smelled faintly of the crayons Ellie had left out on the coffee table. Her sneakers were by the door. Her stuffed rabbit, the one with the missing eye, was on the stairs where she had dropped it that morning on her way to the car. He picked the rabbit up. He stood in the foyer holding a stuffed rabbit in the dark, and he thought, very clearly, I am in love with Nora Blake. It wasn't a surprise. That was the part that surprised him. It wasn't even new. It had been true for years. He took the rabbit upstairs and set it on Ellie's pillow. He stood in the doorway of her room for a minute, looking at the bed she wasn't in, and he thought about Miss Nora, who was sitting right now in a kitchen on Linden Street, probably not moving, probably looking at the shelf they had just put up and trying not to cry. He went downstairs. He got his phone out. He didn't call. He had said he would call tomorrow, and she had told him to take tonight, and he was going to honor that. Because if there was one thing he had figured out in the last hour, it was that he had spent 7 years not being careful with her, and he was not going to spend hour one of the rest of his life making the same mistake. But he did text her. One line. "I'm not running." The 3 dots appeared. They blinked for a long time. Then they went away. Then they came back. Then they went away again. "Go to sleep, Hayes," she finally wrote back. "We'll figure out tomorrow when it's tomorrow." He smiled. It was not a happy smile exactly. It was the smile of a man who had just realized he had been walking around his own life for 7 years with his eyes half closed, and who had just, a little bit, opened them. He set the phone down. He did not sleep that night. He sat on the couch in the living room with the lamp on, and he thought, and at some point around 3 in the morning, Ellie's rabbit ended up in his lap, and he held it the way he had held Ellie in the hospital 4 years ago. And somewhere across town, in a half-finished kitchen on Linden Street, a woman who loved him was sitting on her own couch doing the exact same thing with a pillow. And neither of them knew, yet, that the hardest conversation of their lives was not the one that had just happened. It was the one that was coming. He did not sleep, and he did not pretend to. By the time the sky started to lighten behind the kitchen window, Adrian had made 3 cups of coffee and drunk none of them. They sat on the counter in a line like small, accusing witnesses. At 6:15, his mother's car pulled into the driveway. He watched from the window as Ellie climbed out of the back seat in her pajamas and a winter coat thrown over them. Her hair in the kind of lopsided ponytail his mother was always very proud of, and that Ellie tolerated for about 11 minutes before yanking out. She had a paper bag in her hand. The paper bag, he knew, had cookies in it. His mother had texted him a picture at 9 o'clock the night before of a tray of cookies that had not been an entirely successful batch, and the text underneath it had said, "We baked with love and with questionable ratios." He opened the front door before Ellie got to the step. "Dad," she said, and she ran at him the way she always ran at him, with her whole body forward and her arms up and no thought at all for the idea that he might not catch her, because he always caught her, and she had known this for the entire 4.5 years she had been alive. "Hey, kid, we made cookies." "I heard. Some of them are weird-shaped." "I heard that too. Nana said it's because the butter was an angry butter." "The butter was angry?" "Nana said the butter had a bad attitude." "Well," Adrian said, lifting her up onto his hip, "I don't know what we can do about an angry butter." His mother was coming up the walk with Ellie's little pink backpack over one shoulder, and she stopped when she got close enough to actually see his face. She didn't say anything right away. That was how his mother operated. She would look at you, and she would decide in a second and a half how much of what she was seeing she was going to acknowledge. "Eleanor," she said to Ellie, "go inside and wash your hands, please. You had cookie dough for breakfast." "I only had a little." "A little is a lot when it's before 7 in the morning. Go." Ellie slid down out of Adrian's arms and went. The door banged shut behind her. His mother stayed on the step. "You didn't sleep," she said. "That's not a question." "It's not a question, no." "Mom." "Adrian, you have the face of a man who has been sitting on a couch since midnight. What's going on?" He could have lied. He could have said work, or bills, or Ellie. His mother had accepted worse from him in the past. But he was too tired to build the sentence, and she had a way of looking at him that made lying feel like more effort than it was worth. And so he just exhaled and leaned against the doorframe and said, "Nora told me she's in love with me." His mother did not react. She did not even blink. "And?" she said. "And what?" "And Adrian, and what?" "What did you say?" "I didn't say anything. I left." "You left." "I said I was going to figure it out. And I left." His mother adjusted the strap of the backpack on her shoulder. She was 63 years old and 5'3", and she had raised 2 boys by herself after their father had died at 41, and she had opinions on almost everything in the world. And she was, in that moment, looking at her oldest son with the particular expression of a woman who was trying very hard not to say something she had been holding on to for a long time. "Adrian," she said. "Mom." "Can I speak honestly? You're going to anyway." "I am, yes, but I like to ask." "Speak honestly." She took a breath. She let it out. She looked for a second at a crack in the sidewalk, and then she looked back up at him. "It took her long enough," she said. He stared. "What?" "It took her long enough, Adrian. 7 years. I was beginning to think one of you was going to die of old age before somebody said something out loud." You knew." "Of course I knew." "Of course you knew?" "Sweetheart." "Mom." "Adrian, I love you. You are my son. You are a wonderful father. You are not an observant man." "I am observant." "You are selectively observant. You are observant about things that do not require feelings. You would notice if someone changed the brand of coffee in your office. You did not notice that the woman who has been in your kitchen every Thanksgiving for 6 years has been in love with you the entire time. And I am telling you this now. And I am telling you it with love, And I am also telling you that your grandmother, rest her, would have smacked you on the back of the head with a wooden spoon. Okay, I'm not smacking you with a spoon. I appreciate that. I am giving you the spoon in words. I feel the spoon. She softened. It happened all at once, the way it did with her whole face shifting. She reached up and she put her hand on his cheek the way she had done when he was 6 and when he was 16 and when he was 28 and standing in a hospital holding a baby whose mother had just signed a piece of paper and walked out. Baby, she said, I know. What are you going to do? I don't know. Adrian. I don't know, Mom. I've known for 5 hours. Give me a minute. You've known for 7 years. You've had your minute. He opened his mouth. He closed it. His mother patted his cheek once, firmly, like she was closing an argument on his behalf, and then she handed him the backpack and walked back down the path to her car. Mom, I'll call you tonight. Mom, I'll call you tonight, Adrian. Go talk to that girl. She got in her car. She waved. She pulled out of the driveway. He stood on the step in his socks for a second longer than he needed to. When he went inside, Ellie was at the kitchen table with her hands, miraculously, clean, eating a cookie in the careful, ceremonial way she ate things she was afraid might get taken away. She looked up at him with cookie crumbs on her chin. Dad? Yeah? Why do you look like that? Like what? Like you didn't sleep. I didn't sleep. Why not? Because grown-ups are stupid. Oh, she considered this. She took another bite of cookie. Is Miss Nora coming over today? She said. He felt the question land somewhere in his chest, a clean hit, the way a stone lands in a pond. I don't know, baby. Can you ask her? Why? Because I made her a picture. You made her a picture. At Nana's. Nana said she would like it. Of course Nana did. It's a picture of a cat. Bartholomew? Who's Bartholomew? Nobody. A cat she knew. Never mind. This cat is named Raisin. Raisin. Because he's brown. Raisin the cat. Yeah. He sat down at the table across from her. He watched her eat her cookie. He thought about the fact that his daughter had, unprompted, at his mother's house, sat down and drawn a picture for Nora Blake. He thought about the fact that this was not unusual. He thought about the fact that there was a drawer in Ellie's room with 9 other pictures in it, all of them for Nora. Because sometimes Ellie drew a picture and Nora wasn't there, and Ellie saved it for her. And he did not know when that had started, only that it had. He thought about his mother's words. It took her long enough. He thought about his own. He picked up his phone. It was 6:32 in the morning, which was, he knew, exactly 15 minutes before Nora's first alarm went off. Because she set her first alarm for 6:47 because she believed deeply in the power of a 17-minute snooze. He typed. He deleted. He typed again. Can I come over after I drop Ellie at preschool? He sent it before he could think about it too much. The 3 dots came almost right away. Yeah, I took a personal day. I'm here. He stared at the screen. You took a personal day? I cried in the shower haze. I wasn't going to teach phonics. He laughed. It came out of him in a short, surprised burst, and Ellie looked up from her cookie with her eyebrows up. What? Nothing. You laughed. I did. Why? Because Miss Nora is funny. I know, Ellie said, and went back to her cookie as if this were common knowledge, which, of course, it was. He dropped Ellie off at 9. She made him promise 3 times that he would bring the cat picture to Nora in person, and he made her promise once that she would not draw on the walls at school, which she accepted with the dignity of a monarch agreeing to a reasonable law. He drove to Linden Street the long way. He did not know why. He was aware of doing it, and he did it anyway. He passed the diner they had gone to the morning Marissa left, when Nora had ordered pancakes for him and forced him to eat 3 of them because she said grief was not a reason to have low blood sugar. He passed the park where Ellie had taken her first real steps, on a Saturday afternoon in April, and Nora had been sitting on the bench next to him and had grabbed his arm so hard she left fingernail marks. He passed the hardware store where Nora had dragged him through every aisle for 2 hours looking for the exact shade of blue paint for her bathroom, and then, at the end, had chosen white. He had been mapping his life around this woman for 7 years. He had just never looked at the map. Her porch light was off. That too, he noticed. He knocked this time. He didn't know why. It felt like a thing he should do. She opened the door in a sweatshirt and leggings and no makeup, her hair wet from the shower. And she looked tired the way people look tired when they have been fighting something in their own head all night, which he recognized because he had seen it in the mirror that morning. "Hi," she said. "Hi, Sa. Come in." "Okay." He came in. She shut the door. The house smelled like coffee and the cabin wood's candle, which was burning again even though it was 9:30 in the morning. The shelf they had put up the night before was still crooked. Nothing had been moved on it. "I made coffee," she said. "Okay. Do you want coffee?" "Yeah." She poured 2 cups. Her hands were steady. His were not. They sat down at the kitchen table across from each other, and she wrapped both hands around her mug and did not look at him. "Ellie made you a picture," he said. "What?" "Of a cat named Raisin. She made me promise I'd give it to you in person. It's in my truck. I'll bring it in when I leave." She closed her eyes. A single tear slid down her cheek very fast, like it had been waiting. "Adrian, I know. I can't. I know, Nora, I know. Just let me talk. Please. I've been rehearsing this for 5 hours, and if I don't say it now, I'm going to lose it." She nodded. He set his mug down. He put his hands on the table. "I knew," he said. She looked up. "I knew," he said again. Not the way you were saying it last night, not in a sentence I had in my head, but in a way. I knew. And I didn't want to know, and I made it so I didn't have to. I want to tell you that up front because I don't want to sit here and pretend you blindsided me because you didn't. You've been standing in front of me with this for a long time, and I have been really, really good at looking at the wall behind your head." Her mouth trembled. She pressed her lips together. "I'm sorry," he said. "You don't have to." "I do, though. I really do. Because it wasn't fair, Nora. I made a lot of jokes. I made a lot of little jokes over a lot of years, and I told myself they were safe because, we both knew they were jokes, and that's such a coward's way of thinking about it. Because I meant them. I meant enough of them that I kept making them. I kept making them because it let me have a little taste of the thing without ever having to pay for it. And you paid for it. You paid for every single one of them, and I was standing there counting my change." She was crying. She was not making any sound. He wanted to reach across the table. He didn't. He had said last night that he would not touch her until he knew what the touch meant, and he was going to keep that promise for at least another 5 minutes. "Can I tell you what I did last night?" he said. "Okay." "I sat on my couch for 6 hours. Adrian, I sat on my couch for 6 hours and I went through it. I went through all of it. I went through the hospital. I went through the Christmas with the pancakes. I went through every stupid date I ever went on and texted you about afterwards. And I went through Ellie. Because Ellie was the thing I couldn't get past. Ellie has known you her entire life. Ellie has a drawer of drawings she saves for you. Ellie, when she was 3, told the pediatrician that she had 2 grandmas and 1 Miss Nora. And the pediatrician laughed and I laughed and we never talked about it and that was the end of it. But Nora, that's not nothing. That's a whole kid who has been assuming something I was refusing to say." Her hands were over her mouth now. "I was scared," he said. "I was really scared. I was scared because Marissa left, and because if you and I tried this and it didn't work, I wouldn't just lose a woman, I'd lose you. I'd lose my best friend. I'd lose Ellie's favorite person. I'd lose the only person in my life who, when I'm having a bad day, I don't have to explain anything to. And I told myself I was being noble. I told myself I was protecting you and protecting the kid and protecting everything. And what I was actually doing was protecting myself. I was using you as a safety net, Nora, and telling myself I was being a good friend. And that's..." He had to stop. His throat had closed. "Adrian," Nora said very softly. "Just a second." "Okay." He took a breath. It shook on the way in. He looked at the ceiling, which was cracked in one corner, and he thought, stupidly, I should fix that ceiling for her. And then he thought, no, I don't want to just fix her ceiling. I want to be the person she wakes up with under it. He looked at her. "I am in love with you," he said. She made a small sound, almost a laugh, almost a sob. He couldn't tell which. "I have been in love with you," he said, "for a really long time. I don't know how long. I don't know the day it happened. I don't know if there was a day. I just know that somewhere in there, in all the kitchens and all the birthday parties and all the phone calls, you stopped being a person in my life and you started being the person in my life. And I didn't let myself call it what it was because I was scared and because it was easier. And because as long as I called it friendship, I didn't have to be brave about it. You were the brave one, Nora. You were the brave one last night. I'm sorry I made you be." She put her forehead down on her arm on the table. She did not say anything for a long time. He sat and waited. He did not try to fill the silence. He had spent 7 years filling silences with jokes and deflections and "marry me," said like it was a punchline, and he had decided somewhere between 3 and 4 in the morning that he was not going to do that anymore. She had told him her whole truth last night, and she had waited while he sat on a couch and caught up. The least he could do was wait now. She finally sat up. Her face was blotchy. Her eyes were red. She looked, he thought, extraordinarily beautiful, which was a thing he had known for a long time and was, evidently, now allowed to admit. "Adrian," she said. "Yeah. I need to say something, and I need you to not interrupt me." "Okay. I love you too." "I know. I'm not done." "Sorry. I love you too, and I have loved you too, and I'm going to love you in 15 minutes and in 2 hours and in 3 weeks, no matter what you decide in this kitchen today. I want you to know that. Whatever happens next, whatever this turns into, I'm not unsaying anything. I'm not taking it back. That was what I've been afraid of, that I'd say it and you'd treat it like an embarrassment I needed help cleaning up. I don't want that. I don't need rescue, okay? Okay, I need honesty. I know. I need honesty, and I need you to really think about this before you do anything. I need you to think about Ellie. Because what you said about her is true, Adrian. She has been assuming something. And if you and I do this, if we actually do this, and we decide in 6 months that we made a mistake, it is not going to be a mistake just between us. It is going to be a mistake that lands on a 4-year-old. And I am not willing to do that to her. I love her too much. I know. So I need you to be sure. Nora. What? He leaned forward. He put his hands flat on the table on either side of his coffee mug, like he was bracing himself. "I sat on my couch for 6 hours," he said, "and I went through every reason I should not do this. And there were a lot of them. And I went through them one by one, and at the end of it, there was one left, and it was that I am scared. And I thought about that, and I thought, if the only thing standing between me and the best thing in my life is the fact that I'm scared, I am going to be so angry at myself in 10 years I'm not going to be able to live with it." She looked at him. "I'm sure," he said. "Adrian." "I'm sure, Nora. I'm more sure than I have been about anything since I brought Ellie home." He watched her face break open. It was not a graceful cry. It was not a beautiful woman cries one perfect tear cry. It was the ugly kind, the real kind, the kind that came out of a person who had been holding a very heavy thing for a very long time and had just set it down. Her shoulders shook. Her nose ran. She laughed once, through it, and then she cried some more. And he finally got up out of his chair and walked around the table and crouched down in front of her. And he took both her hands in both of his hands, and he held them. "Hey," he said. "Hi. Hi. You're really sure? I'm really sure. You're not going to wake up in a week and call me and say, 'I'm not going to call you and take it back.' I'm not. Because I can't. I know. I can't do that. I know, Blake, I know." She was laughing a little now through the crying. He reached up with one hand and wiped a tear off her cheek with his thumb, and it was the first time he had ever done that to her, in 7 years, and it was a very small thing, and it felt enormous. "Adrian," she said. "Yeah. I'm going to say something, and it's going to sound insane." "Okay. My coffee's getting cold." He laughed. It cracked out of him. She laughed too, wet and real, and he took her mug off the table and put it in the microwave, because that was what you did with cold coffee in Nora Blake's kitchen. You put it in the microwave, and he had learned this in year 2 of knowing her, and the microwave beeped, And he took the mug out and set it back down in front of her, and he sat down in the chair next to hers instead of across from her. She was still crying a little. He reached over. He took her hand again. "Can I?" he said. "What?" "Can I kiss you?" She laughed. She actually laughed. "Adrian Hayes," she said, "I have been waiting 7 years for you to kiss me. I don't need you to ask permission. Just do it before I lose my nerve." So he did. He leaned in and he kissed her in a half-finished kitchen on Linden Street, with the shelf still crooked above the sink and the cabinwoods candle burning and 2 cups of coffee on the table. And her mouth was warm and a little salty from the crying, and she made a small sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a sigh. And she lifted one hand and put it on the side of his face, and he was aware, distantly, that his hands were shaking and hers were not. And the thing he kept thinking, the thing that kept rolling through his head over and over like a wheel, was, oh, of course it is her. Of course it has always been her. When they pulled back, she was smiling. Not a big smile, a careful one. A smile that still had something scared underneath it, because 7 years of being quiet about a thing does not just fall off a person in 5 minutes. He could feel her breath on his mouth. "Hi," he said. "Hi. That was, yeah. Me too. I don't know what I thought it was going to be like, but it wasn't anything like I thought. Adrian, I'm going to need you to finish one sentence before you start another." "Right, sorry. Okay. Hi." "Hi." They sat there for a minute, just looking at each other, their hands still tangled together on the table. Her coffee was still steaming. His was still cold. Outside, a car went by. Inside, nothing moved. "So," she said. "So, what now?" "I don't know." "You don't know." I have some thoughts, but they're not organized." "Organize them." "Okay. 1. I want to do this. Actually do this. Not just a thing we don't tell anybody. Not a thing we do for a few weeks and see how it feels. I want us to be, whatever the word is. I want to be your person. I want you to be mine." "Okay." 2. Ellie. "Yeah. I want to talk to her." "Now?" "No, not now, but soon. I don't want to sneak around with you. I don't want her to figure it out from us being weird. I want to sit down with her and explain it in a way a 4-year-old can handle." Nora nodded slowly. 3, he said. I think we should go slow, not because I have doubts. I don't. But because you were right last night. This isn't just about us. And also, I want to do this right. I spent 7 years not doing this right. I don't want to blow through the actually doing it right part because I'm in a hurry to catch up. She was smiling at him. It had crept up on her while he was talking. "What?" he said. "Nothing." "What, Blake? You're very romantic when you're exhausted. I did not know this about you." "Don't make fun of me. I'm having a moment." "I'm not making fun of you." "You are a little." "I'm making fun of you a little." "Okay." She leaned forward. She put her forehead against his. Just that for a second. "I love you," she said. "I love you too." "Say it again." "I love you too, Nora." "I'm going to need to hear that a lot. For the next, I don't know, a while. Maybe a few years. You're going to hear it whenever you want. Okay?" "Okay." They stayed like that for a second longer. Then she pulled back and she wiped her face with the heel of her hand, and she said, "Tell me about the picture." "The picture?" "The cat. Raisin." "Oh, right, Raisin. Hold on, I'll get it." He stood up. He was maybe 6 inches taller standing up than he had been 5 minutes ago. He walked out to the truck. He came back with a piece of paper folded into uneven quarters and a preschooler's devotion to the concept of straight edges. He handed it to her. She unfolded it at the table. The cat was a brown blob with 4 rectangles for legs and a triangle for a head and 2 enormous eyes, one green and one blue, because Ellie had not yet committed to the idea that a cat had to have matching eyes. The cat was sitting on what appeared to be a pink couch. Next to the cat was a much smaller blob, also brown, which Ellie had labeled, in her most careful 4-year-old handwriting, Miss Nora. Nora put her hand over her mouth. "She drew you," Adrian said. "She drew you next to the cat. I see that. She made you the same color as the cat. I noticed. I don't know why she did that. Because she loves me. Because she loves you." Nora set the paper down. She ran her thumb along the edge of it. She was not crying, but she was not exactly not crying either. "Adrian," she said. "Yeah. I want to be really careful with her. I know. I mean it. I don't want to walk in and rearrange her life. I don't want to suddenly be a different thing to her. She already knows me. I don't want her to have to reintroduce me in her head. Nora, listen. I don't think she's going to have to reintroduce you in her head. I think she figured this out a year ago. I think we're the ones catching up." Nora laughed. A soft, wet laugh. "Maybe. Definitely. I'm still going to be careful. I know you are. That's one of the reasons I love you." It landed between them in the air, that sentence, casual as any other sentence he had said to her in 7 years, and it took them both a second to recognize it for what it was. She looked at him. He looked at her. Neither of them made a thing of it. That, in itself, was the thing. "What do we do today?" she said. "I don't know." "What do you want to do?" "I want to not do anything dramatic." "Okay. I want to sit here and drink my coffee and, I don't know, watch a movie, or not watch a movie. I want to sit on a couch with you and not be holding my breath for the first time in 7 years. We can do that. Are you sure?" "I'm taking the day, Nora. I already texted my boss from the parking lot." "You what?" "I said I had a family emergency." "Adrian." "What?" "I am not a family emergency." "You kind of are, though." She threw a dish towel at him. He caught it. He put it on the counter. She got up. She took her mug. She took his mug. She refilled them. She came and sat back down, and she put her feet up on the empty chair between them, and he reached over and rested his hand on her ankle, and she looked at him like he had just given her something she had been meaning to ask for. "This is going to be weird, isn't it?" she said. "Yeah, a little. We're going to be bad at this. Probably. We already know how to fight about dishes. We fought about dishes before. We fought about dishes in my kitchen. I maintain I was right about the dishes. You were not right about the dishes. Let's not do this today. We're going to do it eventually." "Eventually, yes." She smiled. He smiled. They sat there, feet tangled together under the table, drinking reheated coffee at 10 in the morning on a Tuesday. At some point he said, "What are we going to tell people?" "The truth." Just like that. "Adrian, I don't know how else to tell people. My plan was when someone asks, I'm going to say, Adrian and I are together. And if they have follow-up questions, they can take them to you." Cowardly. It's called delegation. Your mother is going to lose her mind. My mother has been asking me since 2021 when you were going to, quote, figure it out. Your mother what? My mother has been very patient with me. Your mother is a menace. My mother is a realist. My mother once told me, and I quote, "Honey, you can do a lot worse than a man who remembers your favorite soup when you have strep throat." I remembered your favorite soup when you had strep throat. I know you did, Adrian. That was the whole point of the anecdote. Oh, you really are not observant. My mother said that this morning. Your mother knew too. My mother said it took her long enough. Your mother did not say that. Swear to... Swear. She said that. She also implied I needed to be hit with a spoon. Nora laughed. It was the first full, clean laugh she had done that day, and it filled the kitchen up in a way that made him realize how much he had missed it in the last 18 hours. She laughed until she had to put her head back against the chair, and he sat there and watched her and thought, I get to watch her do this now. I get to watch her laugh, and it's not borrowed anymore. Okay, she said, wiping her eye. Okay, wow, your mother. Unreal. She's going to want to have you over for dinner. I've had dinner at your mother's like 40 times. Yeah, but now it's going to be different. She's going to make the good napkins. The good napkins. The cloth napkins. Adrian, I'm telling you, the cloth napkins are coming out. I am not ready for cloth napkins. No Nobody is. That's how she gets you. They sat in the kitchen for a long time. They did not talk about anything important. They talked about the cat picture, and about the broken cabinet door, and about the fact that Nora was going to have to go back to work tomorrow and explain to her aide that she had not been dying but had been, in fact, emotionally incapacitated. They talked about the weather. They talked about whether she wanted Thai food for lunch. They did not talk about marriage, or the future, or what they were going to tell Ellie, because they had already talked about those things, and because it was good for one morning to just be two people who were finally allowed to sit in the kitchen and be obvious about it. At 11:30, she stood up and stretched and said she was going to take a nap because she had gotten maybe 3 hours of sleep, and Adrian realized he had gotten 0, and he said he would take one too, and so they went into the living room with the unopened box of books and the couch and the one lamp, and they lay down on the couch together, and she put her head on his chest, and he put his arm around her, and neither of them made a big deal out of it, because that was the whole point. It was finally not a big deal. He was asleep in about 90 seconds. She was asleep in about 2 minutes. The cabin woods candle burned on the kitchen counter. The shelf stayed crooked. The cat picture sat on the table with its mismatched eyes. And outside on Linden Street, the October light was turning a little gold. And somewhere across town, a 4-year-old was eating macaroni at a small plastic table and explaining to a boy named Mateo that her father was picking her up today because her father always picked her up on Tuesdays. And this was a fact, and facts, Ellie was learning, were very important things. When Adrian woke up, the first thing he saw was Nora's hair on his shoulder and a patch of sunlight on the floor that had not been there when he fell asleep. He didn't move. He didn't want to. He was aware of everything at once, of the weight of her head, of the rhythm of her breathing, of the low hum of the refrigerator in the next room, of the fact that in 40 minutes he was going to have to get up and go get his daughter from preschool, and that his daughter was going to ask if Miss Nora was coming to dinner, and that he was going to say yes, and that Miss Nora was going to come to dinner, and that somewhere down the line, not today, but somewhere, he was going to have to sit across from Ellie at the kitchen table and use words like, Miss Nora is going to be around more, and Miss Nora and I love each other, and is that okay with you? And Ellie was going to look at him with her enormous, serious 4-year-old face, and she was going to say something he could not predict. He was not afraid of that conversation. He was, for the first time in 7 years, not afraid of very much at all. Nora stirred against his chest. She didn't wake up. She made a small sound and settled deeper, and he tightened his arm around her and closed his eyes again. And for a little while, on a narrow couch in a half-finished rental on Linden Street, a man and a woman who had been best friends for 7 years slept through the middle of a Tuesday in October, and outside the sun moved across the sky, and inside nothing, for the first time in a long time, was being held back. He woke up a second time to his phone vibrating on the coffee table. It was the preschool's automated reminder, the one that went out 15 minutes before pickup and that he had, once, 3 years ago, slept through. He had not slept through it since. Nora was still asleep against his chest, and he was going to have to move, which felt, in that moment, like a small tragedy. Hey, he said. Blake, I gotta go get her. You're not awake. I'm awake. Your eyes are closed. That's a stylistic choice. He laughed into her hair. She shifted slowly and lifted her head, and she blinked at him with the puffy, unfocused look of a person who had not so much napped as lost consciousness. And she said, What time is it? 2:30. We slept for 3 hours. We slept for 3 hours. Adrian. Yeah. Are you going to tell her today? He sat up slowly. She sat up with him. He looked at her in the afternoon light, and he thought about the cat picture on the table, and about Ellie and her tiny chair at the tiny table, and he thought about his mother, and about the cloth napkins, and about 7 years of every single thing he had been refusing to look at, and he shook his head. Not today, he said. I want to do it right. I want to sit down with her, not catch her in a doorway. I want to come home tonight and just have dinner, normal dinner. You, me, her. Let her be around us. Let us be around us. And then this weekend on Saturday maybe, when we're all home, I'll talk to her. Okay. Does that work? Adrian, I don't get a vote on when you talk to your kid. You do, though. You kind of do now. She looked at him. It took her a second. He watched her register the sentence and what it meant, and he watched her decide not to make a joke out of it, which was one of the things he had always loved about her, that she knew when a joke was the wrong shape for a moment. "Then I vote yes," she said quietly. "Saturday." Saturday. He kissed the top of her head. He got up. His back was not pleased with him. The couch had been designed for one person of modest dimensions, not for two adults in various states of emotional collapse, and he made a sound when he stood that Nora laughed at. "Old man," she said. "I'm 32. "Old man." "Are you coming to dinner?" She paused, halfway through sitting up. She looked at him. "Adrian." "What?" "I've been coming to dinner at your house for 6 years." "I know. You've never asked me. I just come." "I know. So why are you asking now?" He scratched the back of his neck. He thought about it. "Because it's different now," he said. "And I don't want to just assume. I don't want the first thing I do the first day to be assuming. I want to ask you. I want to keep asking you probably for a while, until it stops feeling like a thing I have to ask." She stood up. She crossed the room. She put her hands on either side of his face, and she pulled him down and kissed him, once, on the mouth. And it was not the first kiss of the morning, but it was the first one that did not have any crying attached to it, and it felt, he thought, like a different thing entirely. "Yes," she said. "I'll come to dinner." "Okay. I'll bring the garlic bread." "You don't have to bring the garlic bread." "Adrian, you cannot be trusted with garlic bread. We have discussed this. I burned it 1 time. You burned it 4 times. Fine. Bring the garlic bread." Ma. Ellie came out of the preschool at 3 with her backpack dragging on the ground behind her and her jacket unzipped and a purple marker on her cheek that had not been there in the morning. She climbed into her car seat and announced, before Adrian had even shut the door, that Mateo had said his sister was getting a dog, and she did not think this was fair. "Fair to who?" Adrian said. "To me. Because you don't have a dog. Because I don't have a dog and Mateo's sister already has a cat. Mateo's sister has a cat and is getting a dog. Yes. And we have, let's see, 0 dogs and 0 cats. Dad. What? Can we get a dog? No. Dad. Ellie. Why not? Because dogs are a lot of work and I already have you. I'm not work. Eleanor. You are the hardest work I have ever done in my life. I love you very much, but you are not low maintenance." She considered this. She accepted it with the solemn face she reserved for information she was going to chew on for about 4 hours before returning to it. He put the car in gear. "Miss Nora's coming to dinner," he said. Ellie's face in the rearview mirror went immediately bright. It was like someone had turned a lamp on inside her skull. She kicked her feet against the back of the passenger seat, which was something she only did when she was excited past the point of being able to contain it. "Is she bringing the bread?" "She is bringing the bread. The good bread. The good bread. Can I tell her about the cat picture?" "She already has it, baby. I gave it to her this morning." "You did?" "I did. What did she say?" He looked at her in the mirror. "She loved it," he said. "She loved it a lot." "Did she cry?" He didn't answer right away. Ellie was watching him with her head tilted. "She cried a little," he said, "because it was that good." "Oh, yeah. I'm going to make her another one. I bet she'd like that. This one is going to be of a horse." "A horse? A brown horse, named Toast. Toast the horse." "Yes, that's a strong name." "I know." He drove. She talked. Toast the horse apparently was going to be friends with Raisin the cat, and they were going to live on a farm, and the farm was going to have a barn, and the barn was going to be red because barns were red. That was the rule, Dad. That was the rule about barns. He listened. He kept glancing at her in the mirror. She had no idea. She had no idea that her entire small world was, very quietly, shifting under her feet, and he felt a wild, tender surge of love for her total trust in the idea that Tuesday was going to be Tuesday, that Miss Nora was coming over, that her father was driving, that dinner was going to happen, that a horse could be named Toast if you wanted it to be. He thought, "I am going to protect you through this." He thought, "I am not going to let this be a thing that happens to you." I am going to let it be a thing that happens with you. Nora showed up at 6:15 with a loaf of garlic bread wrapped in foil and a salad in a plastic container because she never came to his house empty-handed and never had. She had changed out of the sweatshirt. She had put on a little makeup. He noticed. He did not say anything about it because they were not, yet, at the stage where he could say, "You put on makeup for dinner at my house," without it being a whole production. But he noticed, and some part of him was warm about it for the rest of the night. Ellie heard the door. Ellie came barreling down the hall like she had been fired out of a cannon. "Miss Nora!" "Hi, Peanut. I made you another picture." "You made me another picture? It's a horse. A horse. Named Toast. Toast. Because of being brown. Because of being brown. Obviously. Obviously." Nora crouched down. Ellie crashed into her. Nora caught her and absorbed the impact and stood up with Ellie on her hip like she had been doing it all her life, which, he realized, she basically had. Ellie wrapped her arms around Nora's neck and pressed her cheek to Nora's cheek and closed her eyes like she had arrived somewhere. Adrian watched from the kitchen doorway. He had seen this exact tableau 100 times. He had seen it in his own kitchen, and at the park, and at his mother's, and at Nora's half-finished house, and in a hospital waiting room in the middle of a strep throat scare at 2 in the morning. He had seen it, and he had filed it under Nora is good, with kids, and closed the drawer. And now the drawer was open, and he was looking at what had actually been in there the whole time. It was not Nora is good with kids. It was Nora is Ellie's, in some soft, unspoken way that did not have the word mother attached to it and did not need it. And he wondered, with a small private sting, how many other drawers in his head he was going to have to open in the coming weeks and rename. "What's that face?" Nora said, looking over Ellie's shoulder at him. "What face?" "The face you're making." "I'm not making a face." "He's making a face, Ellie. You're making a face, Dad. Both of you in my house, accusing me of faces." "You're outnumbered," Nora said. "I'm always outnumbered." Dinner was spaghetti. It was the only thing Adrian could reliably make that did not come out of a box. And even then, the sauce was from a jar, and he had been known to burn the pasta water, which Nora maintained was a thing that was not technically possible, but that she had still seen him do. She set the table while he drained the noodles. Ellie sat at her place and arranged her silverware with the serious focus of a surgeon preparing a tray. Nora put the bread in the oven. Adrian poured Ellie's milk. Nora poured the grown-up glasses. They moved around each other without having to talk about it, and not for the first time Adrian realized this too, was something they had been doing for years, and he had simply never looked at it straight on. They ate. Ellie told Nora the entire plot of the horse and cat farm. Nora listened like it was the most important briefing she had ever received. At one point she asked whether the barn had a hayloft, and Ellie stopped chewing and looked at her and said, with genuine awe, "I didn't think about a hayloft." "Well, that's my contribution," Nora said. "Your choice whether to accept." "I accept." "Good." Adrian watched them. He was not speaking much. He didn't need to. There was a warmth in the room that had not been in this kitchen in a long time. Not like this. A round kind of warmth with more than one person in it, and he sat at the head of the table with a glass of wine he had mostly forgotten about, and thought, this is what the rest of my life is going to feel like if I do not mess this up. Then Ellie, with a mouthful of spaghetti, turned to him and said, "Dad?" "Yeah. Is Miss Nora staying for dinner?" Adrian blinked. He looked at his plate, which was, he was pretty sure, the plate of a person who was currently having dinner. He looked at Nora's plate. He looked at Ellie, who was holding her fork halfway to her mouth and watching him with the unbothered directness of a child who had simply asked a question. "Baby," he said, "Miss Nora she is at dinner. We are eating dinner. Right now. I know. So, I mean staying. Staying. Staying." He didn't understand. And then he did. He felt it in his chest before he understood it with his head. It was the way she had said it. Staying for dinner was not what she meant. Staying was what she meant. The for dinner was a wrapper, because she was 4, and she did not have bigger words yet. And she had picked the words that felt closest to the question, and the question, he realized with a small, clean shock, was much older than tonight. She had been waiting to ask it. She had been waiting with it. He looked at Nora. Nora had gone still in her chair. She was holding her fork. She was looking at Ellie with an expression he could not later describe, except to say that it was the expression of a person who has just been handed something very fragile and is not yet sure what it is. "Ellie," Adrian said, and he set his own fork down very carefully, the way you set down something you don't want to drop. "Why are you asking, baby?" Because why? Because Mateo asked at school if Miss Nora was my mom. And I said no. But then I said she was almost. The room went very quiet. Nora's hand went slowly up to her mouth. "You said she was almost," Adrian said. "Almost? What's almost, honey?" "I don't know. It's in between." "In between what?" "In between a friend and a mom." Nora made a small sound which she covered with her hand, and she looked down at her plate, and she did not look up. Ellie kept eating. Ellie did not know she had just said anything particularly remarkable. To Ellie, she had simply answered a question, the way she had answered questions about barns and dogs and angry butter, and she was 4. And 4-year-olds were incapable of understanding that the sentence they had just dropped into the middle of a spaghetti dinner had landed on the table like a small, bright grenade. Adrian did not know how to speak for a second. He took a breath. "Ellie," he said, "come here." "Why?" "Because I want to talk to you." "I'm eating." "I know, you can keep eating. Just come sit on my lap for a second." She considered. She slid down off her chair. She dragged her plate across the table to his place because she was a pragmatist, and she climbed into his lap with her fork in her hand and arranged herself against his chest and resumed eating as if nothing had happened. He wrapped his arms around her. He looked at Nora. Nora had lowered her hand and she was looking at the two of them with her eyes very wet and very bright, and she gave him the smallest nod, a nod that said, "Go ahead. You know her. I trust you." "Peanut," he said against the top of Ellie's head, "can I ask you something?" "Mm-hmm." "Do you want Miss Nora to be around more, at our house?" Ellie paused, fork halfway to her mouth. "Like more than Tuesday," Adrian said. "More than Tuesday." "Yeah." "Like how much more?" "I don't know. Like a lot more." "Like every day more." He felt his own throat close a little. "Maybe, baby. Maybe not every day for a little while, but a lot." Ellie chewed. She thought about it. She was, he knew, consulting the enormous internal filing system that 4-year-olds carried around, the one that had categories like fair and unfair and pizza and not pizza and bedtime and definitely not bedtime, and she was moving this question through it. "Okay," she finally said. "Yeah?" "Yeah. Just okay." "I already want her to be here more." "You do?" "I already want her to be here all the time." He pressed his mouth against her hair. He closed his eyes for a second. "Peanut." "What?" "Miss Nora and I, we love each other, like how you love us, but a little different. Like Mom and Dad love. Like Mom and Dad love, yeah." "Oh. Is that okay?" Ellie pulled back from him. She leaned so she could look at his face, her eyebrows pulled together, her small hands on his chest. She was wearing a spaghetti sauce mustache. She looked extremely serious. "Dad? Yeah. That's a good thing." "Yeah? Yeah." "Why?" "Because then she can stay." He couldn't speak. He wrapped his arms around her tighter, and he pressed his face into the top of her head, and he looked over her shoulder at Nora, and Nora was crying, not hiding it, just crying quietly into her napkin while she tried to smile. "Miss Nora," Ellie said, turning her head against his chest. "Yeah, Peanut." "Are you crying?" "A little." "Are you sad?" "No." "Are you happy?" "Very happy." "Oh, I love you, Ellie." "I love you too, Miss Nora." Ellie sat there in her father's lap, with her fork in her hand, like she had just settled a small piece of family business and was now going to return to her spaghetti, which she did. She twirled her fork the way Nora had taught her to twirl her fork, against the side of the bowl, because Adrian himself did not know how to twirl spaghetti and had been letting Ellie eat it in chopped up pieces like a savage for most of her life, until Nora had, one afternoon, intervened. Adrian watched his daughter eat. He watched the woman he loved wipe her face with a paper napkin and pick up her own fork with a hand that was not quite steady. He watched the steam come off the garlic bread in the middle of the table. He had spent 7 years outrunning this. He had spent 7 years standing with his back to this exact kitchen table, making jokes about marriage and other people's houses, pretending not to notice that the shape of his life had been waiting for a word for a long time. And his daughter, at 4, with a mustache of spaghetti sauce, had walked in and put the word on the table for him, and had called it almost, and had asked if she could have the rest of it. Nobody said anything for a little while. Ellie ate. Nora sipped water. Adrian kept his arms around his daughter, and he breathed in the smell of her hair, strawberry shampoo and preschool, and a little bit of the crayon that had been on her cheek in the car. The kitchen was warm. The light above the table was a little too yellow because the bulb was the wrong kind, and he had been meaning to change it for a month. After a minute, he reached across the table and he put his hand palm up on the tablecloth, an offering. Nora looked at it. She looked at his face. She put her hand in his. They ate the rest of dinner like that, his left hand holding her right hand across the table, Ellie on his lap chewing pasta and swinging her legs. And at one point, Ellie looked down at their joined hands, and then up at his face, and then over at Nora's face. And she didn't say anything. She just leaned over and rested her chin on their joined hands for about 3 seconds, like she was planting a flag, and then sat back up and went back to her bread. "Dad," she said eventually. "Yeah. Can Miss Nora read me the bedtime story?" "If Miss Nora wants to." "Miss Nora." "Yeah. Can you read me the bedtime story?" Nora wiped her cheek one more time, fast, like she was trying to get ahead of it. "Peanut," she said. "I would love to read you the bedtime story." "Okay." "Which one?" "The one about the bear." "Which bear?" "The bear who can't sleep." "Oh, that bear. My favorite bear." "I know. How did you know that was my favorite?" "Because you told me." "I did? The last time." "Oh." Nora laughed a little, with a wet sound in it. "You have a good memory, Miss Nora." "I do, yeah." "Me too." "I know you do." Ellie nodded, as if this too had been settled, and she slid off her father's lap, and she picked up her empty plate, and she marched it over to the sink, and she put it in the sink like a grown-up, which she had been learning to do for about a month, and which she still did with a deeply ceremonial attitude. Then she announced that she was going to go pick out the bedtime book and that nobody should come upstairs until she called for them, and she left the kitchen. Adrian and Nora sat there at the table holding hands, not speaking. "Adrian," Nora finally said. "Yeah." "Your kid." "I know." "Your kid just—" "I know, Nora. She just—" "I know." "I thought we had until Saturday." "I thought we had until Saturday." She skipped ahead. She skipped all the way ahead. "Almost." "Almost." She said almost. I heard her. Nora pressed the heel of her free hand against her forehead. She was smiling. She was also, he thought, about 15 seconds away from a full breakdown, and so was he, and neither of them had the energy for it, and so they just sat there in the quiet kitchen and gripped each other's hands across the table. Upstairs, they heard a small voice yell, "You can come up now!" Nora laughed, a wet, broken, happy laugh. "Go," Adrian said. "Go read to her. I'll do the dishes." "You sure?" "Go, Blake. She asked for you." She stood up. She squeezed his hand once before she let it go. She crossed the kitchen, and she paused at the doorway. And she looked back at him, and her face in that moment was not the face of the woman who had sat across from him this morning at her kitchen table with the coffee gone cold. It was a newer face. Or maybe it was a face he had been seeing for 7 years, finally with the right light on it. "Adrian." "Yeah." "I'm going to go read to our kid." She said it easily, like it wasn't a thing, like it had always been the word. And then she went upstairs. He sat in the kitchen for a long time before he got up to do the dishes. He listened to the small sounds of the house, the water running upstairs where Ellie was brushing her teeth, the soft thud of Nora sitting down on the edge of a small bed, the faint, indistinct music of 2 voices reading a book together about a bear who could not sleep. He sat at his table, in the yellow light from the bulb he had been meaning to change, and he looked at the empty chair where his daughter had been sitting, and at the plate she had carried to the sink, and at the spot on the tablecloth where their hands had been joined, and he understood very clearly and for the first time that his life was no longer a thing he was getting through. It was a thing he was in. It was a thing that had people in it. It had always had people in it. He had just been, for a very long time, standing a little bit off to the side of it, watching. He wasn't standing off to the side anymore. He got up. He did the dishes. Upstairs, a small voice said, "One more page, please." And a softer voice said, "One more page, Peanut." Then lights out, and Adrian Hayes stood at his own sink with his hands in warm water and listened and did not move for a long time. The next morning, Nora's car was still in the driveway. She had slept in the guest room, which was not really a guest room, so much as a small square space with a twin bed and the boxes Adrian had never finished unpacking when they moved in 3 years ago. She had not asked to stay. He had not asked her to stay. Somewhere around 10:30 the night before, with Ellie asleep and the dishes done and the two of them sitting on the couch with the TV on low, Nora had simply leaned her head on his shoulder and said, "I don't think I can drive." And Adrian had said, "Then don't." And that had been the whole negotiation. Ellie found her at 6:45 in the morning. Adrian knew this because he was already in the kitchen making coffee, and he heard his daughter's feet go thump-thump down the hall. And then he heard her stop. And then he heard the guest room door open very, very quietly. And then he heard, in the hushed tone of a 4-year-old convinced she was being stealthy, the words, "Miss Nora." "Miss Nora." "You're in our house." "I know, Peanut." "You slept here." "I did." "Why?" A pause. Adrian smiled down at the coffee pot. He waited. "Because your dad said I could," Nora said. "Oh, is that okay?" "Yes." "Okay." Then the small thump of a small body climbing onto a small bed, and the quiet sound of Nora, in a voice he had never heard her use before, and that he understood in that second that he was going to hear for the rest of his life, saying, "Come here, you, come here." He turned the coffee on. He leaned against the counter. He did not walk down the hall. There were moments, he was learning, that were not his to walk into. He stood there and he listened to the soft murmuring of two voices in a room at the end of the hall, and he let himself, for about 30 seconds, just be a man standing in his kitchen at 6:45 in the morning, while the two people he loved most in the world whispered at each other under a quilt. It was easier than he thought it would be. That was the thing he kept coming back to, in the days and then the weeks that followed. The mechanics of it, the moving parts of turning a 7-year friendship into something bigger, were supposed to be hard. He had been braced for hard. He had been bracing since the night she told him, and for most of the week after, he kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. He kept waiting for the moment when they looked at each other across a table and realized they had made a terrible mistake, when the thing they had would collapse under the weight of what they were asking it to hold. That moment did not come. They fought, sure. They fought about the dishes. They fought once bitterly on a Thursday night in November about whether the thermostat should be set to 68 or 71. And Nora had said, "You are a cold-blooded person, and I refuse to live in a refrigerator." And Adrian had said, "You are wearing 3 sweaters. How cold could you possibly be?" And Nora had stared at him and said, "That is an insane thing to say to a woman who has told you she is cold." And Adrian had, in retrospect, realized she was right, and he had turned the thermostat up, and they had not afterward made a thing of it. That was the part that had surprised him. Not that they fought. They had been fighting for 7 years. It was that after they fought, nothing rearranged itself. Nothing felt broken. He went to bed next to her, and she was still Nora, and she was still annoyed with him, and she was still his. And in the morning, she made the coffee because it was her turn, and she handed him his mug without looking at him and said, "You are still wrong about the thermostat, for the record." And he had kissed the side of her head and said, "I know I am." Marisa found out in the second week of November. He had been dreading it. Marissa had been gone for 4 years, but she had reappeared periodically the way she did. A phone call here. A birthday card for Ellie there. 3 states away and not, as she liked to remind him, permanently out of the picture, though for practical purposes she had been permanently out of the picture since the afternoon she had signed her name on a line and walked out of a hospital. He had no legal reason to tell her. She had no legal standing to weigh in. But she was Ellie's mother, and Ellie, someday, was going to ask questions about the shape of her family, and he was not going to be the person who let his daughter find out about her own life from the wrong direction. So he called her. She picked up on the 4th ring. Her voice was the way it always was on the phone, a little too bright, like she was performing for an audience she could not see. Adrian? Hey, you got a second? I've got a few. Is she okay? Is Ellie okay? Ellie's fine. Ellie's great. This isn't about Ellie. Not really. Okay. He walked out onto his back porch. It was cold. He did not want Nora to overhear him, and he did not want Ellie, who had better hearing than any 4-year-old had a right to overhear him either. I'm seeing someone, he said. Oh, I wanted you to know. Oh, okay. Thanks. I mean, that's nice, Adrian. Good for you. It's Nora. There was a silence on the line. It lasted 2 seconds. It felt longer. Nora. Yeah. Nora Blake. Yeah. Your friend, Nora. Yes. She laughed. It was a strange laugh. Not cruel, just surprised, in a way that had something underneath it he didn't want to look at too closely. Adrian? What? I told you in 2021 that she was in love with you. He stopped. You what? I told you, Adrian. We were at your mother's for the thing, the house warming, when your mom moved to the condo. And I said it in the kitchen. I said, your friend Nora has it bad for you, and you laughed at me. He put his forehead against the porch railing. Marissa, I'm not doing a thing. I'm just saying, I saw it. I said it out loud. You laughed at me. I remember because I was honestly a little jealous, which is a feeling I did not feel like I was allowed to have at that point. So I filed it away. You're telling me. Adrian, everybody saw it. I think your mailman saw it. Okay. Are you happy? He lifted his head off the railing. He looked out over the backyard. Ellie's little plastic playhouse was out there, tipped onto its side by the wind and never righted. A squirrel was sitting on top of it. Yeah, he said. I am. I'm really happy. Good. That's good, Adrian. I'm glad. And Ellie? Ellie loves her. Ellie has loved her for a long time. This isn't a new person in her life. This is just a rearrangement. Okay. I'm not calling to ask for permission. I know. I'm calling because I didn't want you to hear it from someone else. I know. Another pause. Adrian. Yeah, she's a good person. She was always a good person. I never said that. I never said it out loud. But she was nice to me, even toward the end, when I did not deserve nice. And she was nice to Ellie, and she was nice to you. I didn't always treat her the way I should have, because I think I knew. And I didn't want to know. So, for what it's worth, she's a good person, and I'm glad. I'm glad for you. He had not expected that. He stood on the porch in the cold, and he felt something that was not forgiveness exactly, because he had stopped needing her forgiveness a long time ago and had never quite given her his, but was something adjacent to it, something like a door in his chest closing very softly. Thanks, Marissa. Yeah, kiss the kid for me. I will. They hung up. He stood on the porch for a little longer. When he came back inside, Nora was at the kitchen counter with her laptop open and a red pen in her teeth, grading second-grade spelling tests. She looked up. Was that who I think it was? Yeah. And? She said you've had it bad for me since 2021, and she told me at the time, and I laughed in her face. Nora took the pen out of her teeth. Oh my God, oh my gosh, I know. Adrian, I know, Nora. Everybody knew but you. I am aware. She started laughing. He walked over to her and he put his hands on her shoulders, and she leaned her head back against his stomach and laughed up at the ceiling, and he looked down at her and thought, oh well, that's the rest of it then. That's the piece that was still loose. That's closed now, too. By December, she had given up her rental on Linden Street. It was not a dramatic decision. There was no moment where they sat on the couch and had a long, serious talk about cohabitation. It happened instead in small pieces. She had been sleeping at his place most nights because driving home at 11 to a half-finished kitchen was nobody's idea of a good time. Her toothbrush had migrated from the bathroom drawer, where it had lived for 2 years, to the counter beside his, which was, he thought, a significant promotion. Her books started appearing on the shelf in the living room. One morning he opened the coat closet and realized 3 of the coats in it were hers. It was his mother who said it out loud, because of course it was his mother. She had come over for Sunday dinner the way she did once a month, and she had watched Nora pull a casserole out of the oven and Adrian set the table and Ellie climb onto a stool to reach the water pitcher. And she had watched all of this with her hands folded in her lap and a small, amused expression. And when Nora sat down, she had looked at her son across the table and said, "Why is that girl still paying rent on Linden Street?" "Mom?" "I'm asking a question, Adrian." "You are not asking a question." "I'm asking a question. Nora, sweetheart, can I ask you a question?" "Oh no," Nora said. "Why are you still paying rent on Linden Street?" Nora paused, her fork halfway to her mouth. "Because," she said, "that's all I want to know, honey. I'm just curious. Because it's my apartment." "Is it, though?" "Mom." "Adrian, be quiet for 1 second, please. I am having a conversation with Nora." "Nora, where did you sleep last night?" Nora cleared her throat. "Here," she said. "And the night before?" "Here. And the night before that?" "Okay. Just asking." "Mom." "I'm just asking, Adrian." "You're not just asking. You're conducting an intervention at a Sunday dinner table." "I am doing both of those things at the same time. These skills are not mutually exclusive." Ellie, from her chair, said, "What's an intervention?" "It's when your grandmother sticks her nose in other people's business," Adrian said. "Oh." "It's a family tradition." "Oh." Nora was laughing into her napkin. His mother was calmly spooning another serving of casserole onto her plate. 2 weeks later, the truck was loaded with the last of Nora's boxes and a step stool and the potted herb off the crooked shelf, and Linden Street was empty behind them, and Adrian was driving with one hand on the wheel and the other on Nora's thigh, and Ellie was in the back seat with a box on her lap that had the cat picture in it, still carefully preserved from October, along with 9 other pictures from the drawer in her room that she had insisted on bringing back so that Miss Nora would, quote, have all of them in the right house. That was how Nora moved in. Over a weekend with a 4-year-old's collection of drawings in a shoebox and a mother-in-law who later, neither of them would quite agree, had actually been invited. Ellie did not call her mom. That was a thing some of the people in their lives thought would happen, eventually. A few of the more well-meaning ones, including one of Nora's sisters, had gently floated the idea early on of what to do when the time came. Ellie did not call her mom. Ellie at 4, and then at 5, and then at 5.5, called her Miss Nora, because that was what she had always called her, and because Ellie, like most small children, was a creature of stubborn continuity, and the idea of changing the name of a person who had already been in her life for a long time struck her, he thought, as vaguely insulting. Nora did not push. This was one of the many things Adrian watched her not do in those months, with a quiet gratitude that he did not always know how to put into words. She did not push to be called mom. She did not push to replace anyone. She did not push to be in every picture, or to have her name in every doctor's file, or to be the one who picked Ellie up on every Tuesday. She stepped into the life that was already there, and she let it accommodate her at its own speed. She let Ellie decide. She let Adrian decide. She let her own presence, which was a large one, take up exactly as much room as the room was ready to give her, and not 1 inch more. "You're being weird about this," he told her one night, in bed. "You're allowed to want things." "I want things. You know what I mean." "Adrian." "What?" "I am 40 years old." "You are 32. "I feel 40. I feel 40 because I spent 7 years being in love with you, and watching you not notice. And now I am here, and she is here, and you are here, and my house is full of people who love me, and I'm not going to mess this up by wanting the wrong things fast. I am going to take this as slow as it wants to go, okay? Because I already got lucky. I already got the big thing. I do not need to reach for the small things. The small things will come." He had not had anything to say to that. He had just kissed the top of her head, which had become, in the months since October, a kind of punctuation between them. The small things did come. In March, Ellie, at the grocery store, introduced Nora to the cashier as my Nora, without the miss, and neither of them had mentioned it. But Adrian had watched Nora put her hand flat on the conveyor belt for a second before she could move again. In April, Nora sat on the floor of Ellie's room for 3 hours while Ellie ran a temperature of 102, and Ellie, delirious, had asked her not to leave, and Nora had not left. And at 2 in the morning, Ellie had said, without opening her eyes, "I love you, Nora." And Nora had said, "I love you too, Peanut." And that had been that. In June, Adrian's sister got married, and Nora stood next to him at the reception in a blue dress he had not been prepared for. And Ellie, in a role of her own invention, had decided she was responsible for keeping track of Miss Nora's shoes, which Miss Nora had taken off because the heels hurt, and Ellie had sat under the reception table with the shoes in her lap like a small, vigilant dragon, and Adrian had danced with Nora in his socks, so neither of them would be taller than the other. And his mother, from the edge of the dance floor, had lifted her wine glass at him without smiling, which was how his mother told him she was proud of him. He had not asked her to marry him yet. He had thought about it. He had thought about it a lot, in fact. It was a thing that lived in his chest, low, pleasant, patient, not a thing in a hurry. He had learned in the months since that October Tuesday that there was a way of loving a person that was not in a hurry. He had learned that he had spent most of his adult life under the impression that love was a thing you did quickly before it could get away, and that when you loved a person correctly, you did not have to run at them. You did not have to grab. You could simply stand next to them, for months, for years, and let the thing grow at the pace it wanted to grow at. And one day you looked up and it had roots, and the roots were in the floor, and nothing was getting it out. He watched Nora one Sunday morning in July, from the doorway of the kitchen, braiding Ellie's hair at the table. Nora was sitting in the chair. Ellie was standing between her knees. Nora's fingers were moving quickly, small practiced motions, and Ellie was holding very still, because Ellie had recently decided that braids were a serious business, and Nora was telling her a story about a teacher she had had in 4th grade who had once, memorably, sat on a cupcake. "And did she know she sat on it?" Ellie said. "She did not know she sat on it." That was the funny part. Who told her she sat on it? A boy named Kevin. Kevin. Kevin? What did Kevin say? Kevin said, "Mrs. McAllister, I regret to inform you that you are wearing a cupcake." Ellie screamed with laughter. Nora expertly kept braiding. Adrian stood in the doorway, and he watched his daughter laugh with her eyes closed, and he watched the woman he loved reach the end of the braid and secure it with a small elastic. And he watched the two of them sit there like they had been assembled from the same set of materials, and he thought, very clearly, "I am going to marry her. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon." He thought, "I am going to do it somewhere Ellie can be part of it. I'm going to do it somewhere small. I'm going to do it somewhere that actually means something to us. I'm not going to make a show of it. I'm going to do it like she did it. I'm going to do it quiet and serious and true, because that is the way she told me she loved me, and the way you are asked is the way you should ask back." He was going to do it, he realized, in the park on Pine Street, where Ellie had taken her first steps on a Saturday in April almost 3 years ago, with Nora on the bench next to him, her fingernails in his arm. He was going to do it there, at the same bench, on some afternoon when it was warm. He did not tell Nora any of this. He did, however, that afternoon, go to the jewelry store in the strip mall by his office, the one he had walked past 1,400 times in his life and never been inside. And he talked to a woman named Denise for 45 minutes. And he left with nothing, because he had discovered in those 45 minutes that he did not know Nora's ring size, and he was not willing to guess. And he was furthermore going to need a plan. He got the plan together over the next few weeks. The plan involved his mother, Ellie, a tiny bouquet of flowers, a ring he had driven 2 hours to a nicer jewelry store to find, and a Saturday in late August when the weather was supposed to be exactly right. He did not say anything to Nora about any of it. He just kept living his life with her. He made coffee in the mornings, and he went to work, and he came home at 6, and he helped Ellie with her reading, and he folded laundry next to Nora on Sunday nights while they watched whatever show they were watching, and he kissed her in the kitchen when she wasn't expecting it, and he kissed the top of Ellie's head when he tucked her in, and he lay next to Nora at night and listened to her breathing and thought, a little longer, it's almost the right time, and Nora, beside him in the dark, had no idea. Or maybe she did. It was hard to tell. With her. He had learned a lot of things about Nora Blake in the 11 months since October, and one of them was that she was usually about 6 steps ahead of him in every direction, and she was usually too kind to say so. But even if she knew, she did not let on. She let him have his secret. She let him walk around the house in August with the small, bright feeling in his chest that he was about to do something that would change everything, and she let him have that feeling without taking it from him, because that was the kind of person she was, and always had been. And he was, very slowly, still figuring out how to deserve her. The Saturday came, and the weather held. It was the last weekend in August, the kind of afternoon where the light came down slanted and gold through the trees on Pine Street, and Adrian parked a block away because he did not want Nora to see the car and start asking questions. Ellie was in the back seat in a yellow sundress his mother had ironed that morning, clutching a small bouquet of daisies and one slightly wilted sunflower they had picked up at the grocery store because Ellie had insisted, and the ring was in his jacket pocket, and he could feel it there, a small, heavy thing pressed against his ribs. "Dad? Yeah, I'm nervous." "Peanut, you don't have to be nervous, you're just walking." "What if I drop the flowers?" "Then you pick them up." "What if she cries?" "She's going to cry." "Are you going to cry?" He looked at her in the rearview mirror. She was 5 now, and she was, if possible, even more serious than she had been at 4, and she was looking at him with the total focus of a small person who had been entrusted with a very large job. "Probably," he said. Oh, they got out. They walked to the park. Nora was already there, on the bench by the playground, because he had told her to meet them there at 3:30, and had been vague about why. And she was sitting with a book open on her lap that she was not reading, because she could see them coming down the path, and Ellie in the yellow dress with the flowers was not a subtle sight. She stood up. "Adrian," she said. "Hi. What is this?" Just come here. For a second, please." He was aware of his own voice shaking a little, and he was aware that he had rehearsed a whole speech in the shower for 2 weeks and could not, in that moment, remember any of it. Ellie was holding his hand very tightly. Nora was looking at Ellie, at the flowers, at him, and he watched her face do the small, fast shift of a woman who has just figured out what is happening about 2 seconds before she was supposed to. "Adrian, I had a speech. I had a whole speech. I don't remember any of it." "Adrian, can I just—" "Yes." He knelt down, on the grass, on one knee, which was ridiculous and which he did anyway because Ellie had been very firm that morning that this was the correct procedure and he was not going to disappoint his daughter. Ellie handed Nora the flowers. Nora took them. Nora's hand was already over her mouth. "Blake," he said. "Yeah, I had 7 years to figure this out, and I figured it out 11 months ago. And I am still, every single morning, catching up to how much I love you. Adrian, I'm not done." "Okay. I was a coward. For a long time. I was a coward because loving you was the bravest thing I was ever going to do. And I did not feel brave. For a lot of years. And you waited. You waited through every stupid thing I did. You waited while I was a father and not a partner. You waited while I dated other people and came home and told you about it. You waited while I made jokes about marriage in your kitchen and then laughed them off. And you never made me feel small for making you wait." He took the ring out of his pocket. It was a small thing. It was not a dramatic ring. It was exactly the ring she would have picked for herself because he had, finally, after 7 years plus 11 months, started paying attention. "I'm not asking you because it's the next thing to do," he said. "I'm asking you because you already are this. You already are my family. You already are Ellie's family. I'm not asking you to become anything. I'm asking you to let me call it what it is, out loud, in front of people, the way you deserve to be called it a long time ago. Will you marry me?" Nora was crying. She was laughing. Ellie was standing next to her with her hand on Nora's elbow, steadying her, like a small yellow usher at a wedding. "Adrian Hayes," Nora said through the tears, "you are the slowest man I have ever loved in my life." "I know." "Yes." "Yes?" "Yes, yes, yes. Put the ring on. Put the ring on before I lose it." He put the ring on. His hands were shaking. Her hands were shaking. Ellie threw the sunflower for reasons Ellie alone understood, and then picked it back up, and then handed it to Nora. And Nora, laughing and crying, bent down and picked Ellie up and held her on her hip. And Adrian stood up from the grass, and he put his arms around both of them, his daughter and the woman who was, now, officially, the mother of his family, And the three of them stood there in the late summer light on Pine Street, and Ellie, from between them, said in a very small voice, "Can we go get ice cream now?" And they laughed, all three of them, and walked to the ice cream place 2 blocks over, Ellie between them with a hand in each of theirs. Later, much later, after Ellie was asleep with chocolate on her chin and Nora was curled against him on the couch, with her hand turned toward the lamp so she could look at the ring, Adrian thought about what he had learned. He had learned it slowly. He had learned it the way most people learn anything that matters. Too late, and by accident, and with a lot of help. Love, the kind that actually stays, rarely shows up looking like love. It does not arrive in a thunderclap. It does not walk in the door dressed for the part. It is almost never the stranger you meet at a party or the person across a crowded room. Most of the time, the love that changes a life is the person who has already been in the life, quietly, for years. The one who remembers how you take your coffee, the one who knows your kid's favorite yogurt, the one who sits next to you in the waiting room and does not need to be asked. It is the person who has been loving you without conditions and without announcements, while you were busy looking somewhere else. The bravery is not in finding them. The bravery is in finally turning your head. The bravery is in saying the word out loud instead of leaving it as a joke. He had almost missed it. He had almost spent the rest of his life making marry me jokes in other people's kitchens. He had almost let the best thing in his life stay quiet in the corner of it, because quiet was easier than brave, and brave, for most of his 30s, had scared him more than loneliness did. He pulled Nora a little closer. She did not open her eyes, but she smiled. If there was a thing to say at the end of it, a thing he wished somebody had said to him at 25 or at 28 or at any of the small, stubborn points along the way where he could have looked up and seen her sooner, it was this: do not wait for the love of your life to arrive. She may already be there. She may already be in your kitchen. She may already be braiding your daughter's hair. And the only thing standing between you and the rest of your life, most of the time, is the courage to stop calling her a friend. He kissed the top of her head. She turned her face up to him in the lamplight and said, "What are you thinking about, Hayes?" "Nothing," he said. "I'm just home."